Wow, welcome back, everybody. This is awesome. We have really good attendance. Um, so maybe we'll do a quick, particularly for folks to know who's in the room. And hopefully I bought enough scones. Wow. But there's Rick, there's scones and Ann, there's scones from Sister's Bakery box.
Okay.
I was giving business to Sisters because they didn't have much business over the weekend with the fire. Okay, so thank you everybody for showing up again for the starting up the fall series of the meetings. I think everybody knows me, but I'm Lori Faya, with the city, I'm the environmental resources manager. So why don't we go around this room so everybody on screen knows who's here, because we're just little tiny pinpoints to them. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kristen Reidelberger. I work at Central Oregon Land Watch as the Associate Program Manager in the Cities and Towns program.
I am Elizabeth O'Keefe, City of Bend Water Services Department, working on the stormwater program.
I'm Shannon Ostendorf, and I work for Deschutes County now, and I'm managing our facilities and our stormwater program as part of that.
So Shannon just agreed to join the group. I'm really thrilled to have her because she has a past history of like working on the Central Oregon Stormwater Manual and things like that. It'd be great.
And worked in operations for stormwater for Bend and Redmond.
Shane Cochran, senior geologist with Walls Group. We're a environmental consulting, geotech engineering, and construction material services firm.
Bronwyn Mastro, landscape architect with Bend Park and Recreation District.
Austin Sonheggie, City of Engineering, focused on water and stormwater.
And Oren, that do communications for Public Works.
Rick Martinson, Winter Creek.
So, well, we may as well just keep going because it's been a little while. Let's go right on the screen. And everybody will notice that Aubrey is back helping us facilitate. Yay. So, we're excited about that. So let's, I'm just gonna look at the order on the screen up here. So let's go Aubrey and then Trista.
Yeah, so quick hello to everybody. So I'm Aubrey Koenig. I've been helping the city team kind of over the last year or so since this group, maybe 2 years even, since this group reconvened. And it's nice, I think, with the hybrid format. Lori usually kind of organizes in the room space, and I keep an eye on the facilitation on this side of things. So excited to rejoin the team and kick things off for this fall. And then Trista is also a familiar face and rejoining. I'll kick it over to her next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Trista Kobleski, and I'm a stormwater planner at OTAC, a consultant. We've been working on the stormwater master plan, and I'm excited to listen in to hear Lori and Austin present it, the final recommendations today.
Hey, Angela.
Hi, everyone. I'll crash as soon as if I have my camera on for more than about 15 seconds. So I'll turn it off here in a second, but I just wanted to say hi. I'm Angela Reinhold, Senior Water Advisor with the Water Resources Department.
Awesome. Wait a minute, who's Richard's note taker?
That's something that keeps popping up that I can't figure out why.
Yeah, so Rick has an AI note taker that has joined us online.
Yeah.
And may tell us a few things as we go. So
you know how to turn it off? It's popping up all the time. I have no idea.
Oh, good. Okay.
Troublesome IT.
And you can kick them out of the meeting, like the admin can remove them from the meeting.
Good, remove it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll work on that in a sec. We keep going here. Ashlyn.
I'm Ashlyn Gerbsko. I am a development manager with Polish Homes. So I oversee land development in our region.
Okay, and it's Brian.
Yep. Hi, Brian Wilkinson, Principal Civil Engineer with AKS Engineering here in Bend.
Mark.
Hi, Mark Buckley. I'm an environmental economist at Eco Northwest and also representing the Environment and Climate Committee.
Great. And then Pablo.
Hello, everybody. Pablo Martos. I'm with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. I write the stormwater permits, and I'm technically called the Municipal Stormwater Program Coordinator. So I like to drop in on these meetings every once in a while.
Yeah, we're glad you do. Thank you. Okay, I think that's everybody. And just for this room, just so you know, every once in a while somebody may come wandering around. They were testing all the fire alarms right before this meeting, and so I think the noisy part is done, but I think they're still going around, I don't know, poking at things. So we'll just ignore that. Aubrey, you want to push us along?
Yeah. So this is our, first of the fall series of meetings, and our focus today is going to be stormwater. Austin is going to be our main speaker. Hour and a half together today, so we'll keep it rolling. I'll flip over to the agenda. Just logistics wise, we try to send out a meeting reminder with this agenda and some focus questions for the group to be thinking about a week prior to each time that we meet. And those are also posted to the website, and I'm going to drop that in the chat here too, just so folks have it handy. The meeting videos and everything else get posted up at this location. So if you're ever looking for materials and want to flip back, that's easily available. Or if you want to share it with somebody else that you know in the community might have an interest. So this is our chance to reconvene the WAG to share updates on the Stormwater Master Plan, which is in its finale phase. Woohoo! Very exciting. And then also regroup on the drainage and density discussion that the team has had over the course of multiple meetings through the last year and into this spring too. So some updates there. And before we get there, always like to take a look back at meeting reflections. So it has been a while since this group had a chance to come together. But last meeting that was this typical format was in May, and that was also a stormwater focus and a stormwater master plan discussion with a lot of information about levels of service and a chance to do some polling on this group's feelings about certain kinds of levels of service. Also a chance just to discuss or to review how the WAG input has been reflected in that stormwater master plan development. Austin, Lori, anything else that you wanted to mention from that May meeting?
I think that's good because that's going to be we're going to continue from that today. Yeah. So, and then I know you didn't get to go on the tour, but so that's the next thing. We had a really great attendance at the tour. Really appreciated that. I hope folks enjoyed walking around Overturf and talking about, kind of overall ecological management of that site. That's kind of a park, but it's also a water facility site. I will say the follow on from that was we did end up doing some fire fuel management. So we contracted out work and focused on, it was like the first 20 feet back behind you. You'll recall, for those who went, that has people's houses all the way around it, ringing it. And so the first about 20 feet back, we did work. We got pretty much just good comments from the community. We did a lot of work to make sure folks knew it was going to happen, but I think there's more sites to think about, and I think a lot more work to think about. In fact, we'll probably bring it up at a future meeting, is to talk about fire-wise, water-wise management of these big sites and how to develop plans for those sites, and then of course we have to figure out funding, because it was not inexpensive to do just that bit of fuel management on that site. But anyways, we did follow up from that discussion.
And I noticed that, thank you, Lori. I noticed, Jay, that you joined online, so just want to say a quick welcome. We won't subject you to all the introductions, but thanks for joining us today. We're just getting things rolling. So that's a quick look back. We also have in our agenda packet, there's a draft meeting roadmap. These are some of the topics that we're hoping to cover in our subsequent meetings this fall. And we have some ideas. The city team has some ideas about bringing in some guest speakers along the way too, just to liven things up. So potentially a water-wise, fire-wise discussion and some stormwater updates in our October meeting. Possibly involving a guest speaker there, and then some stormwater program updates from Elizabeth and team in November. And want to note that I think it's our November meeting is only going to be virtual, because that's when the city is relocating to its new building. And then in December, which we typically do as a year in review and also a look forward, kind of collecting topics of interest and group input in our final calendar year meeting. That will be a hybrid meeting that will be Teams as usual, but in the new location that the city is going to be moving into. So we'll keep you updated on those logistics. But just a note that we're going to be modifying the location here as we move forward.
Yes, so we will be, so our department is moving to the new Public Works facility, which is just kind of north of where we are, kind of the north end of town, Juniper Ridge. The first week of November, we'll be moving into Austin, and the engineering group will already be there. But if things hold, I just don't think it makes sense to try to hold an in-person meeting like the day after we move in. But hopefully December, the weather will hold and people want to come in person if they can, and can, in addition to the meeting, maybe a bit of a tour of the new facility. It's pretty amazing. It's a really large site. And I'm hoping, I mean, again, it'll be December, so I don't know how much there will be to see, but we're putting in a demonstration garden, water-wise garden. And so we can at least see what it looks like in December, and then we'll, look at it again in the spring when there's like stuff really growing. And we're setting it up so that there's different types of plant materials, each in their own irrigation zone, and we'll be able to display the water use from those different types of gardens. So I'm pretty excited about that.
And although it's not shown on this slide, the intent is to have more water conservation topics in our meeting series in spring. There will be a lot more to share as that kind of year closes out, and there's some more input on outcomes. So I think
there'll be a number of things.
Yeah. Austin, we're ready to turn it over to you.
All right, and I might steal the screen if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to click through some of these slides pretty quick. Go. All right. So yeah, what I wanted to do today, it's going to be a little bit of review. Going to just click through the master plan at a glance. I know originally we're expecting this to really be moving to council now, but through some legal logistical things, the public facility plan, it's part of our comprehensive master plan, has to go concurrent with this. So we've just delayed the formal adoption of the master plan, but I think this is a really good opportunity to just look at everything we talked about. And then we just had the draft master plan come through. Yes. So as promised, I want to share that with the group, and Lori, maybe we'll talk a little bit towards the end, the best way to do that. But just seems like a good opportunity to give a kind of recap of what we looked at, what we have, and then want to have more of an in-depth discussion about the drainage and density topic and where we're going to go with that into the future. So I'll just click through pretty quickly. A lot of this is going to be pretty redundant. But again, the main purpose of the stormwater master plan was to identify, your CIP program, particularly looking at improving the quality of stormwater runoff and reducing flooding was our two main objectives. But then in addition to that, we also looked at some key policy topics, one being climate change, a look at what our standards are, design criteria, and some influences there, drainage and density, and we'll get to that in the second half of the presentation, and then level of service. So here's the timeline. You'll see the implementation we pushed out showing through December. Really, that's to get our public facility plan, which is ultimately going to be like a bridge version of the master plan, and then just working those through the approval process in sequence.
Oh, and Aubrey just posted the link to our webpage about the master plan, so we can just put the draft plan on the webpage and everybody can access it there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then an overview of who we talked to, the Water Advisory Group, you guys were our main external stakeholder. Appreciate all the feedback and workshops we had over the last year and a half. We also did some breakouts with some engineering groups, AKS, Dowell, HSRP, and Wallace Group gave us some really good engineering feedback with some of the policy topics we were looking at. We talked to COBA, and major internal coordination here because again, with focusing on the drainage and density.
I think everybody knows COBA is the builders.
Central Oregon Building Association. We got some feedback from the city of Redmond, some of their recent changes and implementations. And then our project webpage where you will be able to find the draft here shortly. So kind of the meat and potatoes, the capital improvements. Again, we established our values. We screened through a number of workshops, the issues and the data, some CCTV, all that, to put through our prioritization matrix, which resulted in a number of capital projects. And again, the two distinguishing features of those projects were drainage and water quality. So again, flooding nuisance problems and things that drain to the river. So at a glance, we came up with 12 CIP projects to be implemented over the next 20 years. And we're working with the FCS group, they're our financial group, to help take a look at this. But from a high glance, the projected costs of these fit in line with our current stormwater program. So everything really tracked well through what our current operation is and what we're hoping to accomplish. Outside of the CIPs, there were other two main categories that we looked at from more of a programmatic approach. And these are things that maybe wouldn't warrant a full-on multi-million-dollar capital project, but are smaller issues and objectives that we can either do either as synergy to other projects going on or even internally, depending on that. And so the two categories are UICs. So that could either be legacy drill holes that are either within the 2-year time of travel or in close proximity to drinking water wells. And then also what we're calling a major maintenance program. These are, flooding issues outside of the UIC concept that, warrant some attention, but don't quite trigger a capital project. So specifically with the UICs, drill holes was a major one. We had a specific study that looked at what our prioritized locations. Again, the 2-year time of travel was really the biggest one to our municipal wells, but then others that are, close to those drinking water wells. With that, we had a new concept, this deep dry well that you guys all gave us some good information on, good feedback. And we are working internally to bring that into our standards. Elizabeth's been a key lead on all that. And we're talking about how we can go deeper now that we can more clearly understand our depth to groundwater, and then also some changes to the setback requirements to municipal, or not to municipal, but to drinking water wells. The other side of that is just failing UICs around town that are causing us flooding nuisance issues. So we have these mapped and prioritized that we're gonna, in the next 5, 10, 20 years, allocate funding to, basically go in and retrofit these. The other part of the program is the major maintenance. Again, these are areas where we just have nuisance stormwater problems that don't quite warrant the capital project. But we got these mapped, and the hope is just to keep awareness of these when we go do any other kind of projects where we can hopefully solve some of these issues. That gets us into our policy recommendations.
Maybe I'll just mention, Austin, so you mentioned with the capital program that a quick initial look financially looks like the amount of money we've been spending from a capital budgeting standpoint probably means it'll fit budget wise, but some of these programmatic things are new and are additions. So when we get to doing a rate study for stormwater, that's one of the things we'll have to evaluate, is whether there will be a potential need for rate increases to be able to also implement the programmatic areas, because that's kind of the new stuff. That is likely to come after we finish doing water rate study, which you've heard a little bit about, and there'll be more coming on that in the winter and spring.
Yeah, and then that's a good point, Lori. There's kind of another, I guess, strand in, and we'll get to it a little bit in our level of service here. But just this growing amount of infrastructure in the city. So, and what does that mean for our ongoing O&M and, potential, rate increases to get more staff to continue to manage more infrastructure. But we'll talk about that here in a second. Climate change, we looked at that. Really interesting. We found we're still on Atlas 2, last updated in the 70s. And I think this last month has been a good example of some of these very intense storm frequencies that we're seeing. And so what this led us to basically document is a need to potentially update our design criteria, what these realistic storm events that we're seeing, what we expect those to look like in the next 50 years. And so I think two major things coming out of that, Atlas 15 is hopefully soon going to hit, and that's going to update the storm frequency information for Oregon and Washington. So we're really excited to see that. But in addition to that, we're working on getting just local weather stations and monitoring in place. And that's already ongoing. We're looking at working with the Bureau of Reclamation to get 5 more rain gauges to hopefully just influence that storm data to have better basis of design moving forward when we're engineering these facilities.
Better understanding the microclimates across the city.
And that kind of springboards us into another conversation of updating the COSM. So coming after the master plan, a major, collaboration with cities in Central Oregon, we want to look at a COSM update. So we think it's
Central Oregon Stormwater Manual.
Central Oregon Stormwater Manual. And then level of service. So this, we basically use this to better lay out like 10 different categories of stormwater management within the city. And I think a major accomplishment we had here is really just providing structure into better documenting where we put our efforts, tracking the time and the frequencies that we are servicing certain facilities, above, below ground inspections, all those things that our ongoing O&M group do. And trying to do that in a little bit more detail so that then we can correlate, as we increase the quantity of infrastructure to help, justify, more support, more staff, and just better track how we're doing. And this will feed into that rate study conversation moving forward. So, in the goal of data-driven decision-making, I think this level of service exercise that we did will really help put a lot of structure to moving forward. So yeah, and here's just another, snapshot of what we looked at. And again, it's the whole reactive versus proactive approach to, managing our stormwater. So with that, we have our draft stormwater master plan. We'll get that uploaded to our webpage here this week, and we love any feedback you all might have on that. And then we are hoping, to the public facility plan will require 2 readings before getting adopted into the comprehensive mass management plan. It's a part of our city code. And we're trying to align that final adoption with the stormwater master plan adoption. And then moving forward again into the rate study and all that kind of ongoing financial side of things. So that is the quick snapshot again of the master plan. Again, we really appreciate all the feedback. This group has been so helpful in being the sounding board and providing some really good feedback. I don't know if anybody has any general comments to make right now on it. You can pause for a second if there's any quick feedback, and then we'll kind of get into our policy discussion.
Oh, we'll send out after this. Once we post it, we'll let everybody know and send you the link again. So if you feel like reading through the whole thing, that would be awesome. But and let us know if you have any comments, because it's like the final draft. And we'll let you know if it would be helpful to get comments or anything as we take it to council. So yeah.
What format would you want feedback in, like an email, or is there some specific way?
I think an email would be best. And if there's, specifics where you want to add more detailed comment, we could always send over the Word version as well. I think we'll upload the PDF. But if you have detailed comments you want to make or changes to language, just reach out to me, and I can get you the Word document, probably go through track changes if it's anything outside of just an email comment.
Not so much a comment, but a question. You mentioned the COSM update. When is that discussion starting?
So we have budgeted for, excuse me, eating a scone here. We've budgeted for the update of the Central Oregon Stormwater Manual. It's a little complicated because it's kind of owned by the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, right? It's located on their website. They coordinated in the past the creation and update to it. My anticipation is I think their key natural resources staff have left. And my guess at this point is it probably will make sense for City of Bend to offer to lead the update process, but we'll want to have all the other cities and the county and other jurisdictions on board as stakeholders. So we kind of have to, I think we're going to take the next year and figure that part out. Okay. And like how we'll manage this beast. But I guess if I were to guess, I would guess we will end up leading it. I think City of Redmond is very interested and they might throw a little bit of funding towards it. And then the other folks are all very small jurisdictions. And so kind of see if we can get a little bit of skin in the game from the other jurisdictions. But my hope would be that July of next year we'll be actually kicking it off.
And maybe it's worth mentioning too, I think before summer crazy schedules happened, we were meeting with the City of Redmond monthly. And we were just reading through the COSM and making notes. So we do have some pretty good, I guess, first steps that we've taken to, all sit down together and look at what's there and adjustments we want to make. But
we'll have plenty of opportunity for folks to provide comments on what they'd like to see changed. It's actually a really great manual. It's been a long time. It needs some new tools in the toolkit. I can need some updates in regards to like infiltration testing and some things like that. Probably a few other things, and then we'll have to talk with everybody. But I prefer that the standards reside there and we use those. But we're the jurisdiction with 2 stormwater permits from DEQ. Some of the other jurisdictions have 1 stormwater permit on the UIC side, but we'll have to look and see like what matches our permits for all of us and what may have to be in individual standards. So I just picture us having a lot of workshops and kind of working through topic by topic.
And I think the release of Atlas 15 will be a big part of this too. I think it would benefit us to, hold off and hopefully that, comes out here in the next few months within the year. Because I think that's a real crux of that update is like knowing what the realistic storm, events that are going to be facing our area. Right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of folks that use that manual. I mean, not only Central Oregon, but there are other folks throughout kind of Eastern Oregon who use it. But I think we'll also look to like, up to Washington, there's the Department of Ecology has a Eastern Washington manual. I think we could pick up some good things from that as well. So more to come on that one.
All right, so then with the remainder of the time, we were hoping to kind of give an update about where we landed with the drainage and density topic and where we're going with it. It's really a beast of a topic because it's changing the way really we're looking at stormwater management in the city. And so the 2 focus questions, which will make a little bit more sense once we get through this, but just to plug the group, should there be a minimum lot size for on-site stormwater management? So right now we're managing kind of all of our water on private sites, but as we're seeing those sites get smaller and densification, should we look at changing that to where it is actually feasible with a minimum lot size to actually accomplish that? And then the second one is how can we encourage developers to take on more of a centralized stormwater management approach when it's necessary? So when you do have the small lots, dense developments, really trying to encourage and make more clear the pathway for a centralized onsite. And we'll get
Like
into
a subdivision level facility, how to really encourage that more. And whether the question could even end up being, depending on that first question, about if lots are so small, it's unrealistic to handle stormwater on site, then are there situations where it's required that there be a subdivision level facility?
And again, that'll make a little bit more sense with some context here. Again, the issue we're just seeing with the increasing dense development, finding room on these, smaller sites to actually put stormwater facilities that aren't in conflict with, building structural codes and things like that. Making sure we have separations from the foundations, but also not, within a retaining wall or a slope or somewhere where it could, run off site and cause other, either private or public draining problems.
I think this picture is such a great illustration, and I think we've shown this to some of you before, but it just amazes me how perfectly it demonstrates the issues. The boulder rock wall is like the property line of this for this new house. You can see the swale or rain garden or whatever you want to call it between that and the foundation. It's supposed to be 10 feet away from the foundation. It's supposed to be 5 feet away from the property line. Our building inspectors don't know what to do with it when they see this and it's after the fact. We're not going to make them tear the house down. So in fact, we're trying to put in some steps right now to develop some tools to show builders and sign off on how they're actually supposed to place these, but it's just going to continue to be a conflict of not enough room, and then trying to get the housing or other buildings in. The other thing this site had was on the far side in the back, there's a really steep slope down to an old pumice mine area that now is a BPRD park. And there's not much of a setback from that either, which to me might be a COSM Central Oregon Stormwater Manual update item, is having these things have a setback from steep slopes as well.
We had some major issues with stormwater and trail blowout over the winter, like coming off of private property and eroding the hillside and then messing up the trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think the other issue that's
this
kind of plaguing this as well is like, what are your resulting infiltration rates, right? When you have mass grading for a subdivision and you've, basically compacted large areas to structural grade, is on-site infiltration even feasible anymore? Like what's really left? So that leads into the concept of centralized on-site stormwater facilities. And I think we're all familiar with these. There's a couple examples I think we looked at in past field visits, but it's really just, at the earlier stages of development of these subdivision developments to designate privately owned tracts where this, commingled stormwater can travel to.
I think for those who have familiarity more with the west side of the Cascades, it's almost kind of humorous, because on the west side, pretty much everything's handled at subdivision level. It has been forever, because they don't have the infiltration capacity that we do. And so we've always just assumed it could all be handled on site, and you don't commingle your public and private flows. And but it's time to recognize that that's not working as well anymore.
Yeah, and through the WAG discussions, particularly some of Pablo's input, is historically, we've been looking at on-site, but really the DEQ interpretation of that stormwater management could still apply to these kind of subdivision level facilities where it is still considered an on-site management. But typically, the city of Bend has only really put these into place through the master planning process. We did take a look at our codes and our development code and standards and found that there's actually more avenues that could be put into place. So I think that's the big first step here, is really establishing that path so that we can open up this concept to development, that's not quite going through a master planning process. So that's a major, I don't want to say hurdle or burden on the city, where we're trying to make more clear what that avenue would be under existing code and development.
We need to update all our own processes to be able to figure out how to advertise this and offer it, encourage it up front. What we need for applications at land use level as well as at then building permit level.
Because going back to, kind of the city's development process, the first step typically is a pre-application meeting where you come in with the high level concept of what you want to develop, and then you're going to get some notes back from the engineering and the planning team. But the stormwater, I guess, recommendations are usually pretty vague, right? They're build stormwater in compliance with the code. And I think that's a major area where we can improve on, where we can, better explain what this subdivision or centralized location concept would look like, to try to encourage that thought process and planning early on in the layout. So we kind of broke it out into like 4 different approaches to stormwater management. The first one would be business as usual, which, for all the issues we've talked about that we're seeing, isn't really feasible, as a sustainable way to manage stormwater. It also conflicts with some of our permitting requirements as well. And so, moving to option 2, it's really just the improved enforcement of making sure these stormwater facilities actually meet the intended use and the, standards and requirements. And Lori kind of alluded to that already, where we're already working on some processes through our permitting software.
We could have Elizabeth really quick talk about what she's working on right now, because we have a November 1 deadline from our permit.
So yeah, the requirement in our MS4 permit is for any project that creates or replaces 5,000 square feet of impervious surface has to meet post-construction requirements for stormwater. So basically maintaining their stormwater on site, because we don't really let anything go to the river in Bend, any new runoff. So as part of that, we're revising some of our existing processes. We do already have some things implemented through COSM. It's really just getting rid of a couple exemptions for single family housing. And then ensuring that when we do have large subdivisions come in for development that are not built by the same builder and then sold. So basically a developer may come in and build the infrastructure and then sell off individual lots to individual builders, and they may be on really small lots that aren't disturbing or aren't creating the 5,000 square foot impervious, maybe on that single lot, but as a whole, that development does create that amount of impervious surface. We're ensuring by our November 1 deadline that we're going to capture those specific subdivisions by providing maintenance agreements kind of during or concurrent with the land use process, so that it's tied to the entire area, even if the homes haven't been built yet, to kind of get around that loophole. And then we'll also be implementing templates for those smaller subdivision lots to tell them kind of where and how to place their stormwater and make it easier for builders to implement. So that's kind of what we're doing in the short term by November 1.
Yeah, so summarizing, we're going to be cracking down a little bit, making sure that, on the lot by lots do meet these requirements, but we're also, putting a lot of effort in developing tools, awareness, early conversations to make sure that the approaches to the management are going to be successful. So.
Yeah, and I'm kind of hoping with these things we need to do by November 1 to make sure we're compliant with the permit may create an opportunity for the individual builders to go, hey, developer, we'd actually like maybe to pay a little bit more for the lot and you handle the stormwater at a subdivision level. I mean, maybe it'll create some more momentum in that direction.
Yeah, there's a lot of education involved, depending on how these developments, are handing off or So then that takes us to kind of where we're hoping to go, which is centralized on-site. And so the distinction between this and off-site, it's the ownership. And these are owned on private land and maintained by an HOA. And again, this would allow, multiple properties to drain into one centralized facility. Right now, I think our big focus is on creating awareness to the code and providing guidance early on during the development process. But it is a conversation happening further up within the city about, at what point should we start requiring these things to happen? And so that kind of goes to that first question of, do we think there's like a minimum lot size where, on-site management is no longer feasible? Do we think, should there be a threshold where it says, okay, lots smaller than 4,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet must go to a centralized on-site facility? So I don't know if this is a good time to pause, if anybody has any thoughts on that.
To ask that question. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Is there essentially a cutoff where if the lot is smaller than 4,000 square feet, 3,000 square feet, is it even realistic to expect that you could handle the 25-year storm on that parcel without it just leaving the site, washing out into the right of way and ways, or the next door neighbor's property? And
while being in conformance with building codes and some of the other things that are kind of in the gray area right now.
yeah, all these setbacks are a real issue because you have to handle that volume. And then if you're 10 feet away from the foundation, if you're 5 feet away from property lines, you're kind of running out of room.
What if there isn't centralized available in a case of like infill or something?
That is a really good point, and we actually touch on it in the next slide. So I think these are focused on more greenfield developments, more subdivisions, but we do kind of get into that in the next concept for those one-offs infill.
Yeah, but I don't know, are there any thoughts around the room about figuring out, is it a good idea to try to just say, if it's this small or smaller, I'm sorry, you can't really build it on site. Is that a good path to take, or should we always just leave it open as an option? And then the other is how to figure out what should that cutoff be. So
It looks
I don't know, I
like
think
Angela came off mute, so maybe, Angela, did you have
great.
some thoughts there?
I have no idea how I got off mute.
Oh,
No,
well, never mind. I didn't want to make
thank
sure
you,
we didn't
though.
skip over you.
But Brian
Thank you
is
for
showing
that.
himself. Maybe he wants to say something.
Yeah, I mean, all developers will tell you that they want maximum flexibility, right? And I think that that's important to do that, but at the same time, there's also practical reality, especially when you're talking about 20-foot wide townhomes, right? That are attached units and stuff, like you really just have the front yard and the driveway. So there is a minimum size for sure, or that's just impractical to do on-site stormwater. Maybe there's, I guess maybe if you were to do that, I would caveat it, maybe at least for now, something that says, unless they can clearly demonstrate that it is possible, right? And so I'm trying to think of some place that might have like fantastic infiltration, capacity or something, which there are very few of those, but to where they have something. But I guess the other part is like the city stopgap. I'm assuming that they're requiring plot plans to be submitted, right, and reviewed for the stormwater stuff. Because the first time we see these shouldn't be when they're built in the field. It should be at some sort of building permit plot plan review.
Yeah, and that's what's the exemption right now is allowing all these small lots that are currently each individually producing less than 5,000 square feet to be off the hook from that. And that's what Elizabeth's getting at with developing that template that you guys are working on to help us. So yeah, we have to figure out how to get attention to these smaller lots, but also not make it arduous for the applicant or for us as staff to review.
Yep.
Then what do you do with developments where most of them are, say, over the 5,000 and maybe 2 or 3 lots are below that 5,000? So it's just like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of that other increased enforcement too, right? Where I think a lot of the stuff, there's a lot of cases that have been kind of getting let through under this previous interpretation of that 5,000 square foot disturbance. But now with kind of a refocus on, you know, a bigger picture accumulation of disturbance, where even on that small level, triggering the requirement for stormwater maintenance agreements and things that allow the city to maintain and require management and, you know, performance of these facilities into, you know, perpetuity, right? Because before, the city really didn't have much teeth to go and say, hey, you guys filled in this little drainage well, or, you know, even the awareness for the homeowners, and then talking if you're, you know, a lot builder versus a subdivision developer, you know, there's a lot of education to say, hey, we're gonna be cracking down on this. And so trying to get ahead of it so that we're not in situations where it's like, hey, we don't have any centralized, but we are having struggles, you know, managing the stormwater on site, which is causing code violations and things like that. So we're trying to step, you know, concurrently to say, here's a better route, but we will be backing it up with enforcement, and we will have the, you know, mechanisms legally in place to push that enforcement. But completely recognizing the city permitting process and development process needs improvement to clearly show this pathway, this opportunity.
Yeah, and we already have a lengthy process. We already received pushback about not making it easy enough for housing to be created per, you know, governor's push. So how to figure out, it's going to be interesting to figure out how to do this, but I don't think there's any disagreement with that. We're just getting tighter and tighter, and it's just ridiculous to think that the 25-year storm can be handled on some of these tiny little sites. So we need some more options. And so, you know, this is kind of, to me, like the next step is this encouraging more subdivision level facilities, and trying to find all the possible ways to encourage those, potentially in creating these limitations on lot size. But then we're also going to have to get in the discussion of maintenance of these facilities. And then if we have, you know, if you're creating a subdivision level facility, maybe the streets should drain to that too. And then it's a combination of public and private stormwater. And then should it be a private facility or should it be a public facility, which then gets to level of service and costs for us to maintain those facilities. But it may eventually be the best answer is for the city to take care of some of these, because I don't know over the long haul. There's some really great HOAs and there are those that are not so great. And how dependable are those in the long run for maintenance?
Yep.
And you have HOAs disband, or you have them
Yeah.
decide to fill something in, or they're not maintaining it, and you're spending all this money in enforcement, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of problems like that. Can happen.
Yeah.
And it impacts your rates also, right? Like your rate mechanism will have to be adjusted. Well,
Yeah, and I think that kind of draws a pretty good line of like the master plan's involvement on this topic. So basically what we did with the master plan is we identified like, hey, the code does allow this more than we're implementing. And so I think it brings awareness and shine some light on that. And then internally, the city's working beyond the master plan to incorporate that into the design review process to make, you know, early on planning of this. But then it steps into like what Lori's talking about is the cats and dogs living together, private and public runoff. Do these now make sense to do, you know, publicly owned facilities at this point? Be that possibly private runoff is running into the street into a dry well, or, you know, maybe a above ground facility. But it also tracks with that level of service conversation that we had, where we're now looking at logging better metrics for the impacts on the city for additional infrastructure. So if we can quantify, this is what one dry well does in terms of O&M, and then those costs associated with maintaining that, that allows us to have that conversation, right? Because there's a, hey, if you run this to a private facility, that's more burden for the general public to manage. But then you also have this like right now situation where the general public, the stormwater is responding to a lot of these poor performing, illicit discharge. It wouldn't be an illicit discharge, but where you have private runoff going into the public right away, which is a nuisance that the city is spending money to manage. So I think there's a little bit of a trade-off there as well. So if we have the metrics in place to then quantify and understand, what the burden would be cost-wise, it'll help steward that conversation of rate increases into the future. So yeah, I think that's the next one to look at is when you're coming in and turning a 50-acre lot into a bunch of, smaller lots, you're building roads, you're building water mains, sewer mains, stormwater facilities. Should we also look at constructing stormwater facilities that could accommodate private runoff, and then be owned and maintained by the city? This is something that's happening in Redmond. And so that was a lot of good input we had from them. And then the other side of that, like you brought up, was these small infills, right? I think the central core is a good example of that, where we could have, potentially like a fee in lieu type of a situation, or, these smaller specialty plan districts where, it is.
Well, let's divide those into two topics.
Okay.
Let's not do the specially designed districts yet. So this one was small infill. So, I mean, just think like empty lots up on Aubrey Butte or something like that. Or somebody also buys a large lot with a single house on it, does a tear down, divides it up, puts multiple homes on it. Those can be a real problem for figuring out how to handle the stormwater. And it also can be unique site to site. This is why this idea needs further refinement. But in my mind, we may want to try to offer for small infill, got to define small, that they can cut a check. They can pay, they could try to handle it on site, great. But if they can't, they could cut a check. It goes into the stormwater fund and we create a program. So we put this point on a map and we create a program to keep an eye on and ultimately do almost like major maintenance improvements in these areas if it's maybe already doesn't have a good storm system. So I'm not sure exactly how to do it, but I am familiar with using fee in lieu for development. It can be very successful. Folks tend to really like it because it's a whole lot easier to write a check than to go out there and construct something. But we'd have to figure it out in such a way that it's not damaging existing buildings and homeowners and infrastructure. But I think it has a place in our program and it'll be good to try to figure out how to actually set that up and then how to have it be legally responsive. But which is different than, because I think that isn't the next slide the.
No, I think we combined them.
Oh, did we? Oh, okay. So there is then the, yeah, we probably should put that back in to the slide deck. But there's kind of that thought about when you have these kind of large districts like urban renewal districts, things like that, like the central core, some other areas in the city. There's actually several urban renewal areas that you might actually be able to do like a mini master plan for those areas, figure out the unique stormwater management needs for that specific district. And maybe that is something where you literally define how stormwater is going to be managed for everything in that district and set it up, figure out, is that going to be built by developers? Is that going to be built by the city? Are we collecting fee in lieu, and set it up specific to that district?
Or reimbursement or.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
fee in lieu is essentially reimbursement.
And the central core, I think, is like the most shining example of this. Like, we did a separate study from the master plan that looked at the Franklin and Greenwood undercrossings and like specifically what's needed there from that drainage basin. But then it also stems from a more systemic problem, like further into that central core area, everything that's not being captured. So, talks of a new city hall or focus from the city, that would be a good opportunity where maybe we could go in and accommodate additional stormwater infrastructure that then could be, compensated by a private development that comes in the future that wants to utilize some of that drainage facility.
Yeah, so I think with the master plan, we're just gonna raise that topic and note that's probably the best solution for those areas is to do something unique to that area.
So once the master plan now is starting to wrap up, this is now going to kind of jump to a stormwater or a water services group lead, where we're going to continue these conversations. How do we?
So the master plan is, so what you just saw in these slides, the master plan is going to just lay those all out and say, this is what's recommended, these couple of things right away, these other things need some more work. But this is at least laying it out, put it in front of council, council adopt it, and that encourages actual movement on these topics, which a lot of these have been talked about forever and they just haven't gone anywhere. So my anticipation would be we kick off a continued conversation on this and have these things figured out by the time we get to, so we can figure out level of service from that can go into a rate study, and then what's needed for updates to codes and standards. So, and COSM, it could feed into the COSM update as well, potentially, depending on what the other cities want. And there we go. Yeah, that was it.
Lori, I would just add, we are currently able to discharge stormwater from private lots into the right of way, specifically in master plans.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that option does exist for us. And I think we definitely want to leave that option open in the future.
I totally agree. So that's the type of master plan that's a development master plan versus like an infrastructure master plan.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one place we've been able to do those things. And so I think a lot of this discussion is about how to do more of it, even when there's not a master plan.
Yep, agreed.
Mark, it looks like you had a comment earlier. Did we catch what you wanted to share?
Oh, I guess there are a couple things back, but I think in general we've sort of been catching it. I think when we're thinking about some of the scaling size issues, I was curious, maybe this is a Brian question or others, if there are any obvious cost thresholds, sort of knee of the curve types of things. And I know that's always going to fluctuate. But I love how it's headed towards a fee in lieu kind of model, because I think that's very flexible to deal with those sorts of issues. So yeah, it seems good to me right now.
Yeah, I mean, the cost, I would say that at least on a single family home that they're spending at least $5,000 per lot on their stormwater disposal stuff. And it could be up from that, but somewhere between maybe $5,000 and $10,000 per lot. Would be what I would guess.
Yeah, I'd be curious if there's any ballpark sense then of what the equivalent burden would be on the public system and what that fee would have to be set at. But
I have typically, when I've worked with fee in lieu before, when I was city engineer at Tigard, we instituted a fee in lieu in one district in the city. And we actually based it on the representative cost to build a facility on a site. And so we had it, we figured it out that way versus what would be the burden on the existing system, because that was too hard to figure out. So it was just like, well, what's your share? Because you would have had to spend this much anyways building something on your site.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned before, I've worked on this a lot with Seattle Public Utilities, and there we based it on what SPU's marginal costs of new projects were, but it was also moving towards trying to have more of a brokered system where you could also have private, I guess, supply of additional capacity if there was a way to design that. So if there was some private developer that had the capacity to absorb more stormwater than its own site would generate, help to broker that process as well. I don't know if those opportunities arise here at all, but again, just trying to find ways to keep the cost as low as possible for a given level of performance.
Interesting.
Would anything like that ever arise in Bend, do we think? A lot of that was based on some of the very urbanized locations where, land and it's just sort of
Yeah,
on-site
and
was
that's-
very infeasible.
And those are also locations where there's a piped conveyance system. And so, here, everything is dispersed. There's no big system that you're draining into. It's, an individual set of UICs or something like that. So I think there's less opportunity. And the big city ones also often tend to be related to their combined sewer overflow programs, where they're also working to get stormwater out of the sanitary sewer systems. But there might be, particularly at the district approach level, right? Where you're kind of doing the mini master plan type thing. I could see something like that happen.
Would you be looking at like development of a system, development charge for these on-site systems? I mean, currently there's not a stormwater STC, correct?
I have rarely seen SDCs ever developed for stormwater anywhere. And the problem is because systems development charges have to be based on it's buying into existing or future infrastructure that its capacity within that system to serve you. So with like sanitary sewer, it's like you're buying a little bit of capacity in this, you're making the pipe a little bit bigger so it can handle that future development. Since we don't have a centralized system.
But with this, you would, right? You would have localized, centralized systems.
So it would.
And also your rate.
It would have to be very specific to like a district. It would have to be very specific to that. And so I don't know whether that would be an SDC, which is a really complicated process to set versus fee in lieu can be set without that complicated process. That's why the example I mentioned in Tigard, that's one of the reasons we made it a fee in lieu. Is it could just be unique to that area, but it's an interesting question.
And then you'd probably have to totally readjust your rate structure, right?
Yes.
Because currently it's based on your impervious area on your site with the assumption that nothing from the site is draining to the street.
Which is, it's a little odd what our rate is based on. It's the traditional stormwater parlance, right? Everybody sets their rates based on impervious area contribution because that's what's generating runoff, that's what's generating pollutants. It is a little weird to say you have to handle all your stormwater on site, but then we're charging you based on the amount of impervious area on site. And what they're really paying for though is the maintenance of the public system.
Right.
And it still might be.
Then if you have some that are
indicative
going to
enough.
a public system, then you'd have to charge them to, it would probably come.
Potentially, what I've seen happen with stormwater rate studies, because stormwater we tend to not charge very much for. We charge somewhere around $8 per house right now. So you could look at having different charges for different scenarios, but then you have to implement a very complicated rate structure to maybe charge somebody $8.50 a month and somebody else $7.75 a month. And is that even worth the effort or not? So we'll have to go through all of that discussion.
Yeah, it will open up the door.
It will
is what
totally.
I was just like.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts.
Oh, great.
I'm trying to like separate these in my brain in terms of like what kinds of developments. So there's like the larger master plan developments that are greenfield. And then there's smaller infill developments like middle housing. And then there's larger infill developments that might have like 100% lot coverage or something. And I think each of those will probably need their own approach. I think that doing the master plan, getting in early and like right when they're doing pre-app, doing like the planning, getting a sense of like where stormwater facilities could be located, because that's when they're, doing the mapping, seeing where they're placing everything. I'm also wondering how that could, they often have like an open space requirement too, and seeing how that can together with that. But then also wondering with like master plans, because they are really a larger like acreage piece of land, like they often grade it pretty substantially, but there's also sometimes different different grading, different slopes, and like the location of where it's placed could also be pretty important if it's near a canal or if it's near the river. So I think, yeah, I guess just having that approached at the beginning would be ideal. And with that too, I think in terms of like lot size with the master plans, again, they are pretty varied. So there will be like a certain number of single family on a certain size lot. There will be a certain number of like townhomes, mixed multi-unit. And so having like a sense that what's the total amount of impervious surface for the entire site, maybe instead of per lot. And then I think, yeah, I think generally I'm wondering about lot size versus lot coverage too, because even with infill, you can have like a smaller lot size, but a much smaller lot coverage or a very large lot coverage. So thinking about impermeable surfaces versus lot size.
Yeah, percent coverage might be a really interesting discussion. I agree.
And then that, I think too, could potentially encourage them to do more impervious surfaces in their development too. They can. And then let me see. Yeah, I think so for like the smaller infill housing or developments of any sort. I think having a fee in lieu could be really helpful. I think especially for those middle housing plan divisions. And I also wonder, like with those small developments, even if there's like some kind of like in a pre-app meeting where you just talk with them and say like you could like a cottage cluster, they have a green space in the center, so that could be put to this purpose.
Yep.
So just some kind of like consultation for those and because
I kind of agree. I think where we're missing out, I mean, this requires staff time, but being able to capture things early. I mean, I was like, should we require more pre-apps? Make them free, whatever we need to do, but so that you get people in the door and you're talking to them at a more high level stage before it's like 90% signed.
Well, and even like the quality of that conversation, like right now it's so minimal out of pre-op. And like, and we have some examples, and we met with the engineering department for something, and the stormwater advice is do the stormwater for the code, and that's where I think our first opportunity is like expanding on that, making clear like, look, you have some of these co-centralized location opportunities available right now, and it doesn't have to be like a real heavy lift of a specific master planning process. So I think that's our first step, is just like having better feedback and guidance in the beginning. So when they're coming and they're figuring out how they're laying out the lots, the certain types of housing and the coverage and things like that, that they don't miss that opportunity to say, hey, this would be a great place where we could check the box for our open space requirements, also double it as some kind of a stormwater facility, and just being like better stewards of that process from like an administrative part.
Yeah, to figure out how to be educated internally to have those conversations.
Right. And I think there's good progress being made just in that, private development seems very open, and, they see that they experience the issue at the completion stage, right? Like where they're trying to sign off on final inspections for things that they know like aren't really going to work. But then the way the city had interpreted those types of developments, we didn't really have a lot of authority to, enforce the fact that they're not really working, or basically the single family exemption. But now, taking another look at that definition with the permitting requirements, we see that we do have that authority and responsibility to assure that. So I think it kind of two ways, like we're going to be, again, increasing that enforcement, say like, we're going to hold you to a higher standard of making it work, but we're also going to try to steward you in other opportunities or avenues of making it work.
I wanna maybe pick on Ashlyn, since she's our developer in the group, and see if you have any thoughts about these questions. I mean, I know that Polish already thinks in this direction and is one of the few in town who's actually doing some subdivision level facilities. But do you think what do you think is missing? Like, how could we encourage more of that? Or, yeah.
I mean, honestly, we have already kind of taken this approach. We do a lot of centralized on-site stormwater management. We have, like, Luderman is a good example.
Yeah.
I mean, Brian does all of our engineering, so he can probably speak on it better than I can.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, Polish has it where we started doing this long ago with, I mean, Luderman might have been the first one we did, and we're kind of instrumental in then changing the development code to even allow it. Right. And so far, I think it's proved to be somewhat successful. And as densities drives down, I think developers that are frankly responsible as the end user are and should take this route. It's the ones that are not, that's going to be added cost for them, right? That they can otherwise pass on to the lot purchaser. And so that's, at the end of the day, this is going to have to be part of the development code, right? And it's going to need to be handled at the tentative plat stage, land use planning stage, to show how these things are going to be served, because we're seeing density on projects that are upcoming that are even twice as dense as the stuff that we're designing these systems for. And there's just, I can already look ahead and see, we don't even know where the street trees are going to go, if there's even going to be street trees, because the driveways are so dense, right?
I do wonder if there's some sort of, this is just my wandering brain, but if there's some sort of, like, you know, our biggest struggle is meeting requirements, density requirements, while also losing a lot to put in a storm pond or something like that. Is there a way that we can, you know, still meet density if we're using one lot for 2 lots or 3 lots for a stormwater facility? If there's a way to, like, waive density requirements, I don't know, something would have to be addressed that way, because 1 or 2 or 3 lots could mean our master plan just doesn't meet density requirements at all.
Yeah. Thank you.
I did want to go back to kind of that lot coverage conversation as well. You know, that's something we've been thinking a lot about, where it's like, maybe, you know, comparing what's the minimum lot versus what are you proposing to cover that lot with. But then it could be one of those, you know, looking at the lifetime of this lot, right? So maybe the initial development only has so much of a lot coverage, but also trying to keep that lot available for future development if that's the route it decides to go, you know, further. So like putting a detached ADU or something on there, right? Where
do we need to presume a certain amount of impervious cover?
Right, and not to miss out on that centralized opportunity when, you know, things are getting built for down the line, you know. So I think that's a big part of what we're thinking about right now, like in terms of like defining a minimum lot size. While day one, you may not be proposing, you know, over 50% coverage, you know, 10 years down the line, what if you do want to do that, but then there now is conflict between, you can't do that because you won't meet drainage requirements. And you lost the opportunity to send that water offsite to a commingled facility. And again, those are just, you know.
It almost would be an interesting analysis to just presume a maximum lot coverage, regardless when something's going in at a greenfield stage. and design your facilities for that. It'd be interesting to see like, what's the difference? Just doing that up front versus, trying to handle it later.
And then it starts becoming like, where do you draw the line logistically with like tracking this kind of stuff? So like City of Redmond, they allow you to either assume no private drainage into the right of way, all private drainage into the right of way, or a portion of that. And now you're kind of opening the door to like, okay, administratively, how long are we going to track this specific site? You know, and how would
They're
you
keeping spreadsheets for subdivisions as they develop.
to say this
I think it's a little
parcel
crazy.
has X capacity to take on this much?
Yeah, so as each lot goes in, they're like, okay, so now I'm subtracting out this much impervious, now I'm subtracting this, there's only this much left that can drain into the right of way. Again, you have a few subdivisions going, that's gonna be a lot of work to track. I think there's gotta be an easier way to do it.
Yeah, to where that's like, you know, kind of my thought right now is almost assume that full lot coverage or whatever the zoning would allow you to do. There's also future changes of zones, but that's more unlikely. But that's one of the things I'm thinking about in terms of like, you'd hate to put up those roadblocks further down the road that would prevent someone from developing because.
I guess if that kind of fits into the fee in lieu, the O2, like if, say you built a single family home, you have a certain amount of stormwater you have to do there. Then you want to build an ADU, I guess you could have the option to expand your stormwater or pay fee in lieu for that extra.
Yes, and if it's after the fact, then if you're paying fee in lieu, then that's presuming you're draining it into the right of way, and does the right of way system have capacity? If you didn't design it that way to begin with. So then at some point it has to be on a list for an upgrade by the city. Like, you know, add another dry well or something like that. I'd love to get us out of that business. I figure we got enough of that business already just with the existing development. It'd be great to do things better than moving forward with the new development. But yeah, we're gonna have to find a balance on all of these things. So these will be the fun discussions to have, and we'll continue to involve this group in that, because I think this has been a great brain trust on all of this. It's always more complicated than it seems like. And particularly where you don't have a centralized system to drain people into.
Trista, I saw you raised your hand.
Oh,
I did, but I think my question got answered. I was just kind of wondering what Redmond was doing with those tracking spreadsheets. Like, do they make a different charge to properties that drain more?
no, it's not a charge-based thing. It's just it's tracking what they approved. So
Yeah.
if they approved a subdivision and like half of the, you know, the front side of the lots, half of each lot was allowed to drain into the right of way, then that equals a certain amount of impervious area. And literally as each lot develops, they're like subtracting that new amount of imperviousness
Yeah.
from the total approved. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, wow, that's a logistical
And
nightmare.
that's just
Yeah,
looking
that's
at
a
like at
nightmare.
the permitting stage when they're reviewing the, you know, private, that lot development. Okay, how much do you need to maintain on site? But they're missing, you know, that cost to the city to maintain that. So they're not currently recouping the costs for that O&M. You know, the developers are paying for the establishment of the facility, but there's no mechanism right now in a varying fee to like incorporate that ongoing maintenance of it.
Yeah, and that'll go to the question of, you know, do you charge differently for some of these different subdivisions, or do you just have everybody pay the same because that's easier? I think part of it will depend on the types of facilities we expect to see, because UICs and sedimentation manholes are not very hard to take care of. And adding like an extra dry well or an extra sedimentation manhole isn't incrementally that big of a deal. Things like above ground vegetated facilities, ponds, stuff like that, definitely require more effort and a different type of effort than we have staff expertise in. And we typically we hire a landscape contractor to do that. So yeah, kind of, it depends.
A question related to the facility type, and I'm gonna expect all the engineers to tell me why this is a terrible idea. But I'm wondering if we've been doing a lot, like especially in places where, lots are tight and it's like driveway and unit or whatever. We've been doing on trails a lot of permeable asphalt as our stormwater BMP. I know there's a maintenance component to it. I know it's harder to install and more expensive, but I'm wondering if there's any, like, if that fits anywhere on a bigger scale, or if it's just there's too many challenges for it to really pencil and make sense as like another tool in the toolbox.
I think it goes into this, like, what's the underlying soils of that impervious, pervious basement? Because, if it's through a park or a trail system that's relatively native and it doesn't, get compacted to 95% maximum density, then yeah, like maybe it'll actually take water and perform. But the concern of like a large subdivision, when they're doing mass grading, that it's like, what are those resulting infiltration rates?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that would, I think even still though, like if you're coming in from a permit review for, I want to build this building, here's the roof shed, and then here's my hardscapes. And if those hardscapes are pervious, then that can put a reduction to what that, volume of runoff for that storm event would be. But I think, there's still that underlying question of like, is it really taking the water, or how much capacity does it really have?
Well, and we need to differentiate here. So porous pavement is not a stormwater management technique. You shouldn't be directing extra water onto it. What it is it's an impervious reduction measure.
It's a low impact development.
Okay.
Yeah, so it can reduce the size of another facility you have to build because you have less impervious area draining to it.
Gotcha.
But you should not be dumping a bunch of other
Extra water on it.
onto it because they just won't function properly. And also, porous pavement can be great. It's really hard to convince transportation engineers and particularly transportation O&M folks that to even try it. They're scared to death of it, but I can show some great examples of its use even on arterial streets like in Gresham. But typically, you have to design that really carefully. It's hard to put big loads on porous pavement. It can work okay for like even in a parking lot, it can work well for the stalls, maybe not as well for the travel lanes. And then like when you're trying to encourage, like, let's encourage people to do this as their driveways. Well, the problem is somebody buys the house or the next person buys the house and they're like, this stuff looks funny. And they hire the contractor to come in and seal their driveway. So I just,
and like you could get really creative and like over excavate underneath and create like a drainage gallery underneath it. But
that's for design is it should have more
but you,
storage under it.
in theory, you could go above and beyond and do that. But again, it's like, yeah.
So but I think it's awesome that you guys are doing it on trails. You have to do enough of it so you can get the batch plant to actually like change over their mix.
We were just talking about that because we have a section going in one park and we were like, oh wait, we want to do this in Drake too. Is there a way we can coordinate to do both at the same time and get them in that same batch?
Yeah. So I think
not-
it could be a toolbox. Go ahead,
Not,
Aubrey. I think we're
not
getting
to
at the
cut
end
things
here.
short. I know we're coming up right on time. So hate
Yeah.
to put a damper on the discussion, but just wanted to do that look forward. So we've got our next meeting will be October 1st and we'll do the reminder and agenda out ahead of that conversation. And we'll have a follow-up to this where we can point people towards the Stormwater Master Plan update page if you want to take a look at that document and then email any suggestions to Austin. I would say, please don't ask for a Word document, but comments are welcome. Track changes comments are hard at this stage, I would say, on a document. But that's my 2 cents from the peanut gallery. So any final closing thoughts from city team?
I don't think so. This has been great. Really appreciate it. I'm glad we brought the discussion back to everybody. Much appreciated. We'll appreciate if people take a look at any part of the document and see what you think. And then, next month we'll talk about water-wise, fire-wise. So that should be really fun as well. So thank you, everybody.